Today's project is a Loom Knitted Fur Hat. I'm using Lion brand Fun Fur from my stash. That's a discontinued yarn, but it's still around. But if you can't find any, there are other similar yarns around. I did a quick search, and this one on Amazon looks very similar. What you're looking for is yarn that is soft, so it will be comfortable around the face, has a strong, thin core, so that it will be manipulable for loom knitting and hooking over without tearing. Not fuzzy or slubby, and medium length lashes. These are called eyelash yarns. We don't want extra long ones because they tend to get too caught on the pegs as we knit. What I mean by fuzzy and slubby is illustrated in this yarn. Patton's Allure feels great, but I find it much more challenging to loom knit. See these bumpy places and thick spots? It's a different kind of knitting feel. So today's advice is for the eyelash style of yarn. I'm running my fur yarn along with a thin, smooth yarn, a strong one. This is a number 1 to number 2 yarn from my stash. If you were to use the same color as your fur yarn, it would be barely noticeable, but I used a different color. And that allows you to see what kind of fabric it produces and how much fur there is to how much base knitting. I'm knitting on this loom, a Cindwood 5/8 inch 48 peg loom. This one's an X loom, but any configuration that you can get a tubular 48 peg piece of knitting will do the job, because we're not going to do anything fancy, no increasing or decreasing. This just happens to be the loom that I have that has the right number of pegs at the right gauge. I believe Cindwood has a regular circular 5/8 inch 48 peg loom, which would also be perfect. Running the 2 yarns together using the U form of the knit stitch, I get about 3 stitches per inch, and the fabric is very stretchy. 48 pegs makes a good child size hat. I would use 60 for an adult. Here are some tips for successful knitting. First, make sure that every stitch you can see both strands of yarn. It's easy to lose track of one, but it's also easy to keep up with them. You just need to knit slowly enough to pay attention. Next, exaggerate the movement when you're hooking over. Really lift that previous stitch over and towards the center of the loom. That helps to make sure that you've got both strands of yarn every time, that the stitches are loose enough, and it begins to free those hairs from the knitting. Loosening those hairs is the key to a fluffy fabric, so help it along by playing with the knitting as it emerges from the loom, and the hairs come out from where they're caught in the stitches. Using fur along with plain yarn really minimizes the rolling, so we don't actually need a hem or ribbing. The pattern for a hat like this is simplicity itself. Just cast on around the loom. I prefer double E-wrap, but it doesn't matter terribly much. Anything that works for you will be okay. And I knit about 40 rows for a child or 60 for an adult. Obviously, you can knit to the length that you really want. And if you're wanting a slouch hat, knit at least 2 inches of extra length beyond what's needed to fit the head. When you've completed all the necessary rows, snip the fur yarn. It's not going to back out of those stitches, and it's much easier to do the gathered crown on the smooth yarn alone. Thread the smooth yarn into a yarn needle and lift off 1 stitch at a time, as usual when gathering off a crown. This is where having run a smooth yarn along with the fur really helps. It would be easy to break the furry yarn, but it's being reinforced by your smooth yarn. Gather in the top of the crown tightly and stitch across the gathered O, just as you would with any plain old gathered crown hat. Then knot your yarn tail, weave it in over and under a few stitches, and snip off any excess length. To take best advantage of the fur, comb or brush the fabric until the maximum number of eyelashes have popped out of the stitches and are sitting fluffing around the surface. And that's all there is to making a successful hat with furry yarn.